They say that love can conquer all, but what they don't tell you is that sometimes survival requires you to become someone you never thought you'd be, someone patient, someone calculating, someone willing to wait 20 years for justice. My name is Camila Diaz, and this is the story of how I lost everything and gained everything back. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled, and please, stay with me until the end. The Metropolitan Club in Manhattan had never looked more beautiful. White peonies cascaded from crystal chandeliers, and 300 guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos clinked champagne glasses beneath gilded ceilings. My father, Marco Diaz, had spared no expense. After all, this wasn't just a wedding, it was a merger. I was 22 years old, wearing a Vera Wang gown that cost more than most people's cars, and I was marrying a man I barely knew. His name was Javier Reeves, 28, handsome in that polished country club way, strong jaw, calculating eyes hidden behind a charming smile, dark hair always perfectly styled. He came from old money, or at least that's what everyone thought. His father, Arthur, ran a commercial real estate firm that had been influential for decades. When Javier proposed after 6 months of courtship, my father shook his hand with genuine approval. "Good match, mija," he'd said. "The Reeves family has excellent connections. This will be good for the business." I didn't love Javier, but I didn't hate him either. At 22, I thought love was something that grew with time, like the leather my family had been crafting for 3 generations. You work the material, soften it, shape it into something beautiful and enduring. I was so naive. The first crack appeared on our honeymoon. We flew first class to Florence, a 2-week stay at a converted villa in the Chianti countryside. It should have been romantic. Rolling vineyards, candlelit dinners, morning espresso on a terrace overlooking cypress trees. On the 3rd morning, I woke early and wandered down to the villa's ceramic studio. The owner, an elderly woman named Francesca, was wedging clay at a worn wooden table. She smiled when she saw me lingering at the doorway. "Vuoi provare?" she asked. "Wanna try?" I'd loved pottery since college. The meditative rhythm of the wheel, the feeling of creating something with my own hands. My studio apartment back in New York had a tiny corner dedicated to it, though I hadn't touched clay in months. Wedding planning had consumed everything. Francesca set me up at a wheel, and for 2 blissful hours, I forgot about seating charts and flower arrangements and the weight of the diamond on my finger. I was just hands and clay and spinning possibility. When I returned to our room, clay still under my fingernails, Javier was awake. His expression made my stomach tighten. "Where were you?" His voice was light, but something underneath it wasn't. "The ceramic studio downstairs. Francesca let me use the wheel. Javier, it was incredible. She studied under... I woke up and you weren't here." He crossed the room, cupping my face with both hands. To anyone else, it would have looked tender, but his grip was just firm enough to make me stand perfectly still. "We're on our honeymoon, Camilla. I want to wake up next to my wife, not wonder where she's run off to." I wasn't running off. I was just... I know. He kissed my forehead, releasing me. "I'm not angry, baby. I just worry. This is our special time together, you know? Just the 2 of us." That afternoon, when I mentioned wanting to visit Francesca's studio again, Javier suggested we go wine tasting instead. And the next day, when I brought it up once more, he'd already booked us a couples massage. By the end of the honeymoon, I hadn't returned to the studio. I told myself it was fine. Marriage was about compromise, wasn't it? We'd been back in New York for 3 months when Javier started talking about children. We were having dinner at his parents' house in Greenwich, an imposing colonial with more rooms than any family could possibly need. His mother, Mary, had prepared enough food for 20 people, though only the 5 of us were eating. Javier, me, Mary, Arthur, and Javier's younger brother Julian, who was studying law at Columbia. "A grandson," Arthur boomed from the head of the table, raising his wine glass. "That's what this family needs. Carry on the Reeves name properly." Mary smiled, but there was something brittle in it. "Don't pressure them, Arthur. They've only been married a few months." "Nonsense." Arthur waved his fork. "Strike while the iron's hot, I say. What do you think, Marco?" He turned to my father, who had been invited as a courtesy. "You want grandchildren, don't you?" My father, always diplomatic, simply smiled. "When Camilla is ready." But Javier had already leaned close, his hand finding mine under the table. "We've talked about it," he said smoothly. "Haven't we, darling?" "We hadn't, not seriously." "A son to take over the business someday," Javier continued, Merge the Diaz and Reeves legacies. It makes perfect sense. Later that night, in our new apartment overlooking Central Park, a wedding gift from my father, Javier was more direct. "We should start trying," he said, unbuttoning his shirt. "My father's right. It's time." I was at my vanity, removing my makeup. In the mirror, I could see him watching me with an expression I was beginning to recognize, that blend of expectation and certainty that I would simply agree. "I'm only 23, I said carefully. "I thought we'd wait a few years, get to know each other better, build our careers." "Your career?" He laughed, not unkindly, but with a dismissiveness that stung. "Baby, you don't need to work. Your father's company practically runs itself, and you're the sole heir. Your career is secure." He came up behind me, hands on my shoulders. "Our child, our son, will inherit an empire. The Diaz leather legacy combined with Reeves real estate, we'd be unstoppable." I looked at his reflection. For the first time, I saw past the charm. He didn't want a child, he wanted a key, a living, breathing key to my father's company. That night, after Javier fell asleep, I stared at the ceiling for hours. My mind raced through scenarios, possibilities, futures I suddenly didn't want. If I had his child, what would that child become? A pawn in whatever game Javier was playing, a Reeves heir that he could leverage against my father's company. At 3 a.m., I made a decision. I would take birth control pills, secretly, and I would keep taking them until I understood exactly who my husband was. The next morning, I told Javier I had a gynecologist appointment for a pre-pregnancy checkup. He kissed me goodbye, already distracted by a phone call. I left the doctor's office with a year's supply of contraceptives hidden in the bottom of my purse. I'd been married for 18 months when Arthur Reeves' real estate empire crumbled like a house of cards. It started with a Wall Street Journal article. "Reeves Properties Faces Liquidity Crisis." Within weeks, the truth emerged. Arthur had over-leveraged everything on a series of speculative Florida developments that had gone catastrophically wrong. Environmental violations, construction delays, hurricanes, a perfect storm of failure. The Reeves family was bankrupt. I watched Javier spiral. He'd stop shaving, drink bourbon at 10 in the morning, spend hours on the phone screaming at lawyers who couldn't save his father's sinking ship. One night, he came home and found me reading in the living room. "Your father," he said without preamble. "He could help us." I lowered my book. "Help how?" "A loan, an investment, a partnership, I don't care what you call it. Marco Diaz has the capital to save my father's company." "Javier, don't." His voice sharpened. "Don't tell me it's not my place to ask. You're my wife. Your family's resources are my family's resources." I'd never seen him like this. Raw, desperate, all charm stripped away. "I'll talk to him," I said quietly. My father invited Javier and Arthur to his office at Diaz Corp headquarters. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I sat in the anteroom close enough to hear everything through the partially open door. "I appreciate you seeing us, Marco," Arthur began, his voice carrying the forced humility of a man unaccustomed to begging. "Of course." My father's tone was cordial but careful. "Your family now." There was a pause. Then Javier spoke. "We need help, sir. The real estate portfolio can be salvaged, but we need an infusion of capital. 20 million would stabilize the situation, and we could structure it as—" "I'm not interested in real estate," my father interrupted gently, "but I am interested in helping my daughter's family." Another pause. I could almost hear Arthur's desperate hope. "I'll offer Arthur a position at Diaz Corp," my father continued. "Executive consultant for corporate partnerships. Respectable salary, benefits, stability. And for you, Javier, a vice president position. You'll oversee our expansion into luxury retail markets. You'll both have meaningful work and income." "That's generous," Arthur said slowly. "But the company will be liquidated," my father said, not unkindly. "Arthur, I've seen the forensics. The debt is too deep, but I'm offering you dignity, a soft landing." Javier's voice was tight. "What about equity? A stake in Diaz Corp as partners?" The silence that followed was heavy. "No," my father finally said. "You'll be employees. Well compensated, well respected, but employees. Diaz Corp remains a family business. Camilla's inheritance is not negotiable." I heard a chair scrape back, Javier standing abruptly. "So we're charity cases," he said bitterly. Your family, my father corrected, and I'm protecting my daughter's future. You can accept my offer or you can refuse it, but those are the terms. They accepted, of course. What choice did they have? But in that moment, I understood something crucial. Javier would never forgive this humiliation, and somehow, some way, he would find a way to take what he believed he deserved. Mary Reeves collapsed during Sunday brunch at the Greenwich house. One moment she was refilling coffee cups, the next she was on the floor, the left side of her face drooping, her hand curled into an immobile claw. Arthur froze. Julian, home from law school for the weekend, called 911, and Javier stepped back as if distance could protect him from the inconvenience. The diagnosis was severe, massive ischemic stroke. The doctor said she'd need months of intensive rehabilitation, then years of ongoing care. She might regain some function, or she might not. It was too early to tell. Someone needs to stay with her, the neurologist explained. She'll need 24-hour supervision for the foreseeable future. Arthur, now in his late 60s and struggling with his own health issues, looked overwhelmed. Julian was still in school, living in a cramped studio apartment. Javier's solution was immediate. Camila will do it, he announced in the hospital waiting room. I stared at him. What? You don't work. You have time. Mother needs family care, not some stranger from an agency. Javier, it's temporary, he said, though we both knew it wasn't. Just until she stabilizes. Julian looked uncomfortable. I could take a semester off. You're in law school, Javier cut him off. Your education matters. Camila doesn't have those obligations. And just like that, it was decided. For the next 6 months, I lived in the Greenwich house, managing Mary's care. Physical therapists, occupational therapists, speech therapists, a parade of specialists trying to rebuild what the stroke had destroyed. Mary couldn't speak at first, but her eyes held so much: fear, frustration, and something else, something that looked almost like apology. What Javier didn't understand was that those years caring for Mary became my greatest weapon. While he was at Diaz Corp networking and scheming, I was learning. Mary, as her speech slowly returned, told me things. Small things at first, family history, old grudges, the real story behind Arthur's business failures. And then, one night in year 7, something bigger. Camila. Her speech was still slurred but improving. We were alone in her bedroom, me helping her prepare for bed. Yes, Mary? Javier. When he was 19, she struggled with the words. Money. Missing money. From Arthur's company. I went very still. What do you mean? She closed her eyes, exhausted by the effort of speaking. Ask Julian. He knows. I protected my son. But you, she gripped my hand with her good one. You are kinder to me than he ever was. That night, I couldn't sleep. The next week, I engineered a meeting with Julian. It was 11 p.m. on a Thursday when Mary had another medical crisis. Not another stroke, but a severe respiratory infection that spiked her fever to 103. The ambulance rushed her to Greenwich Hospital. Javier was at some corporate dinner in the city. When I called him, he said, "Handle it. I can't leave this event. There are clients here." So I sat alone in the fluorescent lit corridor, watching nurses rush past, waiting for doctors to tell me if Mary would survive the night. Footsteps approached. Julian, still wearing his courtroom clothes, a slightly worn suit, tie loosened, exhaustion etched into his face. I came as soon as I heard, he said. How is she? They're stabilizing her. It's the 3rd infection this year. Her immune system. I trailed off. He sat beside me, keeping a respectful distance. Where's Javier? Networking. The word tasted bitter. We sat in silence for a moment. Then Julian spoke quietly. You've been taking care of her for 3 years now. That's extraordinary, Camila. Someone had to. My brother should have, or I should have. You're building your career, I said, echoing Javier's old justification. Helping people who actually need you. Julian looked at me then, really looked at me. The construction fraud case. I won it last month. Got 40 families their compensation back. The developers who'd cut corners faced criminal charges. I heard. Congratulations. It wouldn't have happened without funding for proper forensic accounting. He paused. I've been trying to figure out who the anonymous donor was for months. My firm received $150,000 from a shell company I couldn't trace. I kept my expression neutral. Maybe you have a secret benefactor. Maybe I do. His voice was careful. Someone who believes in justice more than family loyalty. Our eyes met, and understanding passed between us, silent but solid. Julian, I said slowly, if I needed a lawyer someday, a really good lawyer, someone who couldn't be bought or intimidated, would you? Yes, he said immediately. Whatever you need, whenever you need it. I reached into my purse and pulled out a small USB drive and an envelope I'd prepared weeks ago, waiting for the right moment. There's a construction company that's been underbidding on city projects, I said. I think they're cutting corners on worker safety. A friend of my father's mentioned it. I placed the items on the seat between us. That USB has financial records showing ties to shell companies. The envelope has contact information for 3 workers who were injured on site but were pressured not to file reports. Julian picked up the USB slowly. Why are you giving me this? Because you'll actually do something with it. Because you're the only person in your family who still has a spine. I looked toward Mary's room. Your mother told me things, Julian, about Javier, about money that went missing from your father's company when Javier was 19. Julian's jaw tightened. I was 14 when that happened. I didn't understand it then. But yes, there was an accounting discrepancy. Father never pressed charges. Family loyalty, I said softly. Or family shame. Your brother isn't who he pretends to be, I said, and neither am I. Julian studied me for a long moment. You're not just a patient caretaker, are you? No, I admitted. I'm someone who's learning to survive, and maybe someday... I let the sentence hang. Someday, you'll need an army, Julian finished, or at least one good lawyer. He slipped the USB into his pocket. I'll look into this. And Camilla, whatever you're planning, be careful. Javier is... He struggled for words. He's like a shark. He never stops moving, never stops hunting. I know, I said, looking back at Mary's door where machines beep steadily. But even sharks can be caught if you're patient enough, if you wait for the right tide. Before Julian left, he turned back. If you ever need me, for anything, call me, day or night. I owe you. I nodded slowly. I'll remember. And Julian, when that day comes, don't hesitate, because hesitation will be betrayal. He understood. A covenant had been sealed. I discovered it by accident. Mary's primary care physician had prescribed a specific blood pressure medication after a routine cardiac workup. I'd been managing all her medications for years by then, using a pill organizer system with Monday through Sunday compartments. But one Wednesday, when I was refilling the organizer, I noticed something odd. The pill looked different, slightly different shape, slightly different color. I checked the bottle. The pharmacy label matched, but the pills inside didn't. I took one to a pharmacy technician I'd befriended during Mary's various appointments. Can you tell me what this is? She examined it under better light. That's a generic diuretic, hydrochlorothiazide. Why? It's supposed to be lisinopril, for blood pressure. Her eyebrows raised. Those are completely different medications. Where did you get this? I didn't answer directly, but that night, I started paying attention. Mary wasn't the only person in the family taking blood pressure medication. My father, Marco, had been on the same prescription for years, and lately, over the past 6 months, he'd been complaining about feeling unusually fatigued, dizzy, weak. The next Sunday, when we had dinner at my parents' house in Westchester, I watched Javier carefully. He was attentive, solicitous, helping my father to his chair, asking about his health with apparent concern. You should really see a specialist, Marco, Javier said. This fatigue isn't normal. My father waved him off. I'm 65. It comes with the territory. Still, Javier persisted, I worry. The company needs you healthy. And after dinner, while Javier was in the bathroom, I slipped into the kitchen where my father's weekly pill organizer sat on the counter, the same system I used for Mary because I'd set it up for him years ago as a gift. I opened Wednesday's compartment, took out the blood pressure pill. It looked wrong. I pocketed it. Later that week, the pharmacy technician confirmed it. Another diuretic. Whoever's filling these organizers is putting in the wrong medication. My blood ran cold. Javier had been visiting my parents' house every Sunday for months. Always helpful, always concerned, always offering to help organize things while my mother cooked. Always alone in the kitchen for a few minutes. He was systematically weakening my father. Not enough to kill him, not yet. Just enough to make him seem declining, unfit, ready to step down. I went home that night and sat in the dark of our apartment thinking. I could confront Javier. I could tell my father. I could go to the police. Or I could do something smarter. I could document everything, build evidence, and wait. Because if Javier was this calculating, this patient in his cruelty, I needed to be even more so. I started keeping a detailed log. Dates, times, medications. I set up a small camera in my parents' kitchen, hidden in a decorative cookbook on the shelf, angled toward the counter where the pill organizer sat. 2 weeks later, I had footage. Javier, when everyone else was in the dining room, quickly swapping pills from a small plastic bag in his pocket into my father's organizer. I saved everything to an encrypted cloud account only I could access, and I kept silent, because I was learning the most important lesson of all. Revenge isn't a sprint, it's a marathon, and I was willing to run for as long as it took. The pill swapping continued for 2 more years. I didn't stop it. I know how that sounds, callous, maybe even monstrous. But I had learned something crucial about warfare. Sometimes you have to let your enemy think they're winning. Every Sunday, Javier would visit my parents. Every Sunday, I would extract the tampered pills before my father could take them, replacing them with the correct medication from a prescription I'd filled separately. My father never knew. Javier never knew. But I documented everything. The camera footage, the pills themselves, stored in labeled bags with dates. A medical expert's written statement about the potential effects of long-term diuretic use in someone with my father's cardiovascular history. I was building a case, not for the police, not yet, for something bigger. Meanwhile, Javier was thriving at Diaz Corp. My father, believing his son-in-law was genuinely dedicated, had promoted him to Senior Vice President of Strategic Development. Javier had an office on the executive floor, a generous salary, and the ear of the board. He was patient. I had to give him that. He didn't push too hard, didn't reveal his hand. He played the role of dutiful son-in-law perfectly. But I saw the calculations behind his eyes at family dinners, the way he'd steer conversations toward succession planning, the way he'd mention, casually, that Marco should think about slowing down and enjoy retirement while you're still healthy enough. My mother, Lucia, saw it too. "That husband of yours?" she said to me one afternoon when we were alone in her garden. She was pruning roses, her movements precise and controlled, just like everything else about her. "He's very ambitious." "Yes," I said carefully. "Your father thinks Javier has the company's best interests at heart." "And you don't?" She clipped a dead bloom, examining it before dropping it into her basket. "I think Javier has Javier's best interests at heart, which isn't necessarily wrong. Ambition isn't a sin, but the way he looks at your father sometimes." She paused. "It reminds me of how men look at obstacles, not mentors." I said nothing. "Be careful, mija," she continued, not looking at me. "In business and in marriage, the person sleeping next to you can be your greatest ally or your most dangerous enemy. Make sure you know which one you have." I wanted to tell her everything, but I couldn't risk it. Not yet. "I'm careful, Mama," I said quietly. She finally looked at me, her dark eyes sharp. "Good, because your father and I won't be around forever, and when that day comes, you'll need to be more than careful. You'll need to be ruthless." My father's health had been declining for months, or at least, that's what everyone thought. The fatigue, the dizziness, the occasional confusion. His doctors ran test after test but found nothing definitively wrong. Stress, they suggested. Age-related decline, perhaps early-stage cognitive issues. I knew better. I knew exactly what was causing it. But Javier's poisoning had an unintended consequence. It convinced my father that he needed rest. "Lucia and I are taking a trip," he announced at a family dinner in late September. 2 weeks in Turks and Caicos. Doctor's orders, I need to relax, get some sun, clear my head. That's wonderful, Papa, I said, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. We're taking the jet, my mother added. Leave Friday morning, come back on the 15th. Something cold settled in my stomach. Our family's private plane, a Gulfstream G450 that my father had purchased 10 years ago, was maintained impeccably. But still. Have you had the plane serviced recently? I asked. My father waved dismissively. The maintenance team handles all that. It's fine, mija, stop worrying. Javier reached over and squeezed my hand. To everyone else, it looked affectionate, but I felt the warning in his grip. Your father needs this rest, he said smoothly. We all need to support his recovery. The word recovery hung in the air like a blade. They left on a Friday morning. I stood on the tarmac at Teterboro Airport, watching the Gulfstream taxi down the runway. My mother waved from the window. My father was already absorbed in a book. I had a terrible feeling I couldn't name. Javier put his arm around me as the plane lifted off. They'll have a wonderful time, he said. And when they come back, we should talk to your father about succession planning. He's clearly not well enough to maintain this pace. I pulled away. He's going on vacation, Javier. He's not dying. Of course not, he said quickly. Too quickly. I just meant we should think about the future, for everyone's sake. The call came at 11:47 p.m. on Monday. I was in bed, reading. Javier was in his study, working late, or pretending to. My phone rang. Unknown number. Ms. Diaz, a man's voice, official and grave. This is Robert Chen with the NTSB. I'm calling about your parents' aircraft registration number. The rest of his words dissolved into static in my ears. Mechanical failure. Catastrophic engine malfunction. Crash into the Atlantic Ocean 70 miles off the coast of the Bahamas. No survivors. I don't remember hanging up. I don't remember screaming. I only remember Javier's arms around me as I collapsed, and the thought, crystal clear despite my shattering heart, that this was too convenient. The NTSB investigation took 6 weeks. During that time, I moved through the world like a ghost. Funeral arrangements, lawyers, board meetings, a media circus as the business world mourned the loss of Marco and Lucia Diaz. Javier was everywhere, handling things, making decisions, consoling me publicly while privately making calls about transitional leadership at Diaz Corp. But I was watching, always watching. The NTSB's preliminary report came back. The plane's left engine had suffered a catastrophic failure due to a faulty fuel line. But deeper investigation revealed something worse. The fuel line hadn't simply failed. It had been deliberately weakened. This was sabotage. The FBI got involved, and what they found sent shockwaves through the corporate world. The sabotage was traced back to a maintenance contractor, a company called Apex Aviation Services. And Apex had recently been acquired by Santoro Industries, one of Diaz Corp's biggest competitors in the luxury goods market. Victor Santoro had been trying to buy Diaz Corp for years. My father had always refused. With Marco dead and the company in chaos, Santoro had planned to swoop in with a hostile takeover offer. He'd murdered my parents to clear the path. The FBI arrested him 3 days before the funeral, and Javier was genuinely shocked. I saw it in his face when the news broke. He'd been planning something, yes, but he hadn't done this. Someone had beaten him to it. For the first time since I'd known him, I saw Javier afraid. Because if investigators started looking too closely at my father's medical history, at the pills, at the manipulation, he was exposed. 49 days. That's how long traditional mourning lasted in my mother's culture. 7 weeks to honor the dead before returning to the world of the living. I observed every ritual, black clothing, daily prayers, visits to the mausoleum where my parents were interred. Javier played the supportive husband, but I could feel his impatience growing. The board had appointed an interim CEO, my father's longtime COO, a man named Richard Brennan who'd been with the company for 30 years. He was competent, steady, and had no intention of staying long-term. When you're ready, he told me privately, the company is yours. Your father's will makes that clear. But what Richard didn't know was that Javier had other plans. On day 48, I received a call from Javier's assistant. Mrs. Reeves, your husband would like you to attend a board meeting tomorrow at 2 p.m. He asked me to let you know it's important. What's it about? A pause. I think he wants to tell you himself. That night, I barely slept. I knew what was coming. I'd known for 15 years. I called Julian. "Tomorrow," I said simply. "Can you be there?" "I'll be there," he replied, "with everything." The Diaz Corp boardroom occupied the entire 42nd floor of our headquarters in Midtown. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Manhattan like a kingdom laid out for conquest. 12 board members sat around the oval table, Richard Brennan at one end, an empty chair at the other, my father's chair, and Javier standing at the presentation screen like he owned the room. I arrived exactly on time, wearing a black Armani suit and my mother's pearls. No jewelry from Javier. I'd stopped wearing his gifts years ago. "Camila," Javier's smile was warm, sympathetic. "Thank you for coming. I know this is still a difficult time." I took a seat in the middle of the table. Not at the head, not yet. "Let's begin," Richard said quietly. Javier pressed a button and the screen lit up with the Diaz Corp logo. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're at a crossroads," he began. "Marco Diaz was a visionary, but he's gone, and out of respect for his memory and his daughter's grief, I've been managing the transition quietly." He clicked to the next slide. Succession plan. "However, we need formal clarity, which is why I've asked you all here." He pulled a document from his briefcase, official-looking, leather-bound. "This is Marco's final will and testament, filed with his attorney 3 months before his death. In it, he makes his wishes clear." My heart was ice. Every board member leaned forward. Javier began reading. "Given the complexities of modern corporate governance and my daughter Camila's limited experience in operational leadership, I hereby transfer executive control of Diaz Corporation to my son-in-law, Javier Reeves, effective upon my death or incapacity." The room erupted in murmurs. "Furthermore," Javier continued, "I recognize that Camila, due to ongoing health concerns and emotional fragility, would benefit from a reduced role in daily operations. I trust Javier to guide the company while ensuring my daughter's financial security." He looked at me with perfectly performed sympathy. "I'm sorry, Camila. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear." I said nothing. I slowly removed my wedding ring and placed it on the table. The soft clink of platinum on mahogany silenced everyone. "Are you finished?" My voice was steady. Javier blinked. Yes, but there's one more thing." He slid divorce papers across the table to me. "Our marriage has been difficult. I think we both know it's been over for years. I'm offering you a generous settlement. $5 million, the apartment, and a consultancy position if you want it." He gestured toward the door. A young woman entered, visibly pregnant, looking nervous and defiant in equal measure. "This is Amanda," Javier said. "She's carrying my son, the heir that we couldn't have together. I think it's best if we all move forward honestly." The board members looked horrified. Richard Brennan's face was unreadable. I let the silence stretch. Then I stood. "You're right about one thing, Javier. It's time for honesty." The boardroom doors opened. Julian walked in carrying a leather briefcase. Behind him, a woman in a gray suit, forensic accountant, and a man in his 60s, a notary public. Javier's face went pale. "What is this?" "This," I said calmly, "is the truth." Julian placed his briefcase on the table and opened it with deliberate precision. "Good afternoon, board members. I'm Julian Reeves, representing Ms. Camila Diaz in both corporate and family law matters." He pulled out a folder. "Let's address several irregularities in what you've just heard." He slid documents across the table. First, the pre-nuptial agreement signed by Camila Diaz and Javier Reeves on June 15th, 15 years ago. Clause 7, Section 3, Fidelity Requirements. One board member picked it up, reading aloud. "Either party who engages in extramarital relations forfeits all claims to marital assets, including but not limited to stock options, bonuses, and spousal support." Julian nodded. "I have here," he distributed more papers, "hotel receipts, credit card statements, and testimony from 3 witnesses proving that Javier Reeves has been in a relationship with Amanda Miller for 5 years. Not months, years, which means the prenup is voided," another board member finished. "He gets nothing." Javier's hands clenched. "We're not done," Julian interrupted smoothly. "Second, the will." He produced another document. "This is a forensic analysis of the signature on the document Mr. Reeves just presented. The signature attributed to Marco Diaz was digitally copied from a 2019 consulting contract and pasted onto this fabricated will. He clicked a remote. The screen behind him showed a split image, Marco's signature from the fake will alongside his signature from the 2019 contract. They were identical, pixel perfect identical. Human signatures have natural variation, the forensic accountant said, standing. These signatures match at 99.9% accuracy. That's impossible unless one was copied from the other. The will is a forgery, Julian concluded. Felony fraud. Javier shot to his feet. You can't prove. Actually, I said quietly, pulling out a small digital recorder from my purse. I can. I pressed play. Javier's voice filled the boardroom, clear and unmistakable. Those old fools finally died. Christ, I thought Marco would live forever. But that vacation, perfect timing. Now the company's mine. Camilla's too weak to fight back. 20 years of keeping her under my thumb, making her think she's worthless, it paid off. She doesn't even know what's in the real will. Once I'm CEO, I'm selling off that antiquated leather division and pivoting to luxury real estate. That's where the real money is. Father may have failed, but I won't. I'm going to build an empire, and the Diaz name will just be a footnote. The recording continued for 90 seconds. Every board member's face turned ashen. When it ended, the silence was deafening. When did you... Javier's voice cracked. Last week, I said. You were practicing your victory speech in the study after too much bourbon. You were so drunk on your own brilliance, you didn't notice my phone on the bookshelf, recording everything. Richard Brennan stood slowly. Mr. Reeves, you are terminated from Diaz Corporation effective immediately for fraud, breach of fiduciary duty, and attempted corporate theft. Security will escort you from the building. You can't. This is my company, Javier shouted. It was never your company, I said. It was my father's, and now it's mine. Julian placed one final document on the table, which brings us to the real will. The notary public stepped forward, an elderly man with kind eyes. I am Thomas Whitmore, Marco Diaz's personal attorney for 37 years. I hold the authenticated last will and testament of Marco and Lucia Diaz, notarized and witnessed according to New York state law. He opened a sealed envelope, not leather-bound, just simple manila paper. The Diaz estate utilizes a complex trust structure established 18 years ago, shortly after Camila's marriage. And he read, 60% of Diaz Corporation shares are held in an irrevocable trust, with Camila Diaz as the sole beneficiary. This trust activates upon either the death of both grantors or upon Camila's legal divorce from Javier Reeves, whichever occurs first. My breath caught. The remaining 40% is divided among key employees and charitable foundations as outlined in Appendix A. Javier Reeves is explicitly excluded from any inheritance or stock options. Thomas pulled out a letter, handwritten, my father's distinctive script. Marco asked me to give this to Camila when the time came. He handed it to me. My hands shook as I opened it. My dearest Camila, if you're reading this, either I'm gone or you've finally freed yourself from that marriage. Either way, know that I'm proud of you. You thought you were hiding things from me. The birth control pills, your alliance with Julian, your patience and planning. You weren't. I knew everything. I allowed it because I needed you to learn something I couldn't teach you directly. That mercy without strength is weakness, but strength without mercy is tyranny. I saw through Javier the day he asked for your hand. I saw the calculation in his eyes, the hunger that had nothing to do with love. But I also saw that you were young, idealistic, and needed to learn your own lessons. So I allowed the marriage, but I protected you legally, every step of the way. The trust was my insurance policy. If Javier ever tried to take what wasn't his, the very act of divorcing you would hand you complete control. Poetic justice, don't you think? You've endured 20 years of indignity with the grace of a queen and the patience of a general. You've cared for his mother when he abandoned her. You've built alliances when you could have built walls. You've been kind when you had every right to be cruel. That's what makes you worthy of this legacy, not the money or the company, but the character you forged in fire. The company is yours now, Camila, not because you inherited it, but because you earned it. Build something better than I ever could. Be ruthless when you must, but never lose the compassion that makes you who you are. I love you, mija. I always have, and I always will. Your papa tears streamed down my face as I read. Not from grief this time, but from love, from validation, from the profound relief of being truly seen. When I finished, I carefully folded the letter and placed it in my jacket pocket close to my heart. Then I looked at Javier. He stood frozen, his world collapsing around him in real time. You lose, I said simply. You lose everything. Security entered the boardroom, 2 men in dark suits. Mr. Reeves, one said, please come with us. Javier looked around wildly, searching for allies. There were none. As they led him to the door, he turned back one last time. You think you've won. His voice was venomous. I'll fight this. I'll sue. I'll destroy you. With what money? Julian asked calmly. With what reputation? With what evidence? You forged documents, committed fraud, and violated a prenuptial agreement. You're lucky Camilla isn't pressing criminal charges. Yet, I added quietly, Javier's face twisted with rage and something else. Fear. Raw, desperate fear. Then he was gone, the doors closing behind him with a soft final click. The board meeting continued for another hour. Richard Brennan proposed an immediate vote to install me as CEO. It passed unanimously. Your first board meeting as leader, he said with a gentle smile. Your father would be proud. But I wasn't thinking about corporate governance or market share or quarterly earnings. I was thinking about my mother's roses, my father's library, Mary's grateful eyes when I'd helped her relearn how to hold a spoon. I was thinking about the girl I'd been at 22, naive, hopeful, believing that love was something that grew with time. And I was thinking about the woman I'd become, patient, strategic, kind when possible, and ruthless when necessary. Thank you all, I said finally. I know this has been unconventional, but I promise you, Diaz Corporation will not only survive this transition, it will thrive. As the board members filed out, Julian hung back. You did it, he said quietly. We did it, I corrected. I couldn't have done this without you. What will you do now? I looked out the floor-to-ceiling windows at Manhattan stretched below, a city of 8 million people, each fighting their own battles, surviving their own marriages, building their own legacies. Now, I said, I rebuild. Not just the company, everything. Julian nodded. If you need anything, I know, you'll be there. I smiled. Thank you, Julian, for keeping your word. After he left, I sat alone in the boardroom, in my father's chair, watching the sun set over the city. My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Camila, it's Javier. I've been drinking. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Can we talk? Please. I'll change. I'll be better. I love you. Jay. I read it once, then deleted it. Some apologies come too late. Some bridges, once burned, should stay ash. I turned off my phone and sat in the silence, feeling the weight of everything I'd lost and everything I'd gained. Somewhere in the building below, the Diaz Corp machinery continued its rhythms. Designers sketching, manufacturers cutting leather, salespeople closing deals. My legacy, my responsibility, my company. I would not waste it. The lawsuit came within a week. Javier hired a team of lawyers, borrowed money from somewhere, probably old family connections desperate to collect favors. They filed a motion claiming the prenuptial agreement was signed under duress, and that the trust structure was unconscionable and designed to defraud. It was nonsense. Desperate, flailing nonsense. Julian dismantled it in 3 days. Your Honor, he said at the hearing, his voice calm and factual, Mr. Reeves was represented by independent counsel when he signed the prenuptial agreement. He had 30 days to review it. He signed it willingly. The trust structure was established by Marco Diaz using his own assets. Mr. Reeves had no claim to those assets then, and he has no claim now. The judge barely deliberated. Motion denied. Furthermore, given the evidence of fraud and forgery, I'm ordering Mr. Reeves to pay Miss Diaz's legal fees. Next case. Javier's lawyers withdrew the following day. They knew a losing battle when they saw one, but that wasn't enough for me. I want him investigated, I told Julian in my new office, the CEO suite that had once been my father's, for the medication tampering, for everything. Julian's expression was grave. Camila, criminal prosecution is different from civil law. The burden of proof is higher, and the DA will want overwhelming evidence. I have it. I pulled out a file I'd been keeping for 6 years. Camera footage, the tampered pills themselves with chain of custody documentation, a toxicology expert's report on what long-term diuretic use could have done to my father's cardiovascular system. Julian opened the file, reading through page after page. His face grew darker. "This is attempted murder," he said quietly. "I know." "Why didn't you stop him? If you knew he was poisoning your father—" "I replaced the pills," I said, "every week before my father could take them. I have documentation of that too. My father never actually ingested what Javier put in the organizer." "But you let Javier think it was working." "Yes." Julian looked at me for a long moment. "That's incredibly calculating." I learned from the best. My voice was harder than I intended. Javier spent 20 years manipulating me. I spent 6 years building a case that would destroy him completely. Which one of us is the villain? "Neither," Julian said firmly. "You protected your father while gathering evidence. That's not villainy. That's survival." He closed the file. "I'll take this to the district attorney myself. But Camila, are you sure? Once this goes criminal, there's no taking it back. Javier could go to prison." "Good," I said simply. The NYPD Financial Crimes Unit opened an investigation into Javier within 2 weeks. It wasn't just the medication tampering. Once they started digging, they found other things. Embezzlement from Diaz Corp., small amounts over years routed through shell companies, falsified expense reports, kickback schemes with vendors. My father had built a clean company. Javier had been rotting it from the inside. The DA's office called me in for an interview. "Miss Diaz, this evidence you've provided is comprehensive, almost unusually so." The assistant district attorney was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s named Karen Ross. "You documented Mr. Reeves' activities for years without reporting them. Why?" I met her gaze steadily. "Because I needed to be absolutely certain. Because I knew if I accused my husband of poisoning my father without ironclad proof, I'd be dismissed as a hysterical woman. Because the system doesn't protect women who speak up, it protects women who have undeniable evidence." She studied me. "You sound angry." "I am angry, but I'm also patient, and patience wins wars." She smiled slightly. "We're moving forward with charges. Attempted assault, fraud, embezzlement. He'll be arrested within 48 hours. "Thank you." As I left the DA's office, my phone rang. Mary's care facility. "Ms. Diaz, you should come. Mary's asking for you. It's time." I drove to Greenwich, breaking every speed limit. Mary had been declining for months. At 76, after 13 years of stroke complications, her body was finally giving up. When I entered her room, she was conscious but barely. Her eyes found mine immediately. "Camila." Her voice was a whisper. I took her hand, the one that had regained some function over the years. "I'm here. Javier, what happened?" "He's going to face consequences. For everything." She closed her eyes. A single tear traced down her weathered cheek. "Good. I was such a coward." "No," I said gently. "You were a mother. That's different." I let him become a monster. I knew. When he was 19, the money he stole from Arthur, I protected him. I thought, mothers protect their sons. "Mothers protect their children," I corrected, "but children become adults, and adults face consequences." She squeezed my hand weakly. "The nurse has something for you. I wanted to make it right." And a nurse approached, holding a manila envelope and a small key. "She's been holding on to these for months," the nurse explained quietly. "Said to give them to you when the time came." I opened the envelope with shaking hands. Inside was a letter in Mary's shaky handwriting, written months ago when she'd still had more strength. "Dear Camila, I have been a coward my entire life. I saw what Javier was, selfish, manipulative, cruel. But I loved him anyway because he was mine. That's what mothers do," I told myself. "We love unconditionally. But unconditional love shouldn't mean unconditional enabling. When you started caring for me after my stroke, I was bitter. I thought you were performing duty. nothing more. But as the years passed, I saw something I'd never seen in my own son: genuine kindness. You cared for me when I was helpless, when I couldn't speak or feed myself or control my own body. You bathed me, dressed me, sat with me through long nights when I couldn't sleep. Javier visited maybe once a month. You were there almost every day. I realized then that I'd raised the wrong kind of son, and you were the daughter I should have had. The key opens a safety deposit box at Chase Bank, box number 2847. Inside, you'll find documents I've kept hidden for 30 years. Evidence of Javier's theft from Arthur's company when he was 19. Falsified accounting records, confession letters he wrote but never sent, bank statements showing where the money went. Arthur never pressed charges because I begged him not to. I said Javier was young, made a mistake, deserved a second chance. But it wasn't a mistake. It was who he was. That theft, $480,000, is what really bankrupted Arthur's company, not bad investments. Our son stole our future and let his father take the blame. I should have exposed him then. I didn't. I chose my son over the truth. But I can choose differently now. Use these documents however you see fit. Protect yourself. Protect Julian. He's the only good thing I ever gave this world. I'm sorry, Camilla. For everything. For my son. For my silence. For my cowardice. You deserve better than my family, but you became better despite us. Thank you for caring for me when no one else would. Mary. I was crying by the time I finished reading. Mary's eyes were still open, watching me. Forgive me? She whispered. There's nothing to forgive, I said, my voice breaking. You gave me Julian. You trusted me with the truth. That's more than enough. She smiled, a real smile, peaceful and relieved. You're free now. So are you, I whispered. Her hand relaxed in mine. Her breathing slowed, steadied, then stopped. Mary Reeves died at 4:17 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, with her daughter-in-law holding her hand and forgiveness in her heart. I sat with her for an hour, crying for the woman she could have been, grateful for the woman she became at the end. The funeral was small. Just me, Julian, and a handful of Mary's old friends. Javier didn't attend. He was out on bail, facing 3 felony charges, and his lawyers had advised him to stay away. After the service, Julian and I stood by Mary's grave. She loved you, I said, in her own way. I know. His voice was thick. She was a complicated woman, but at the end, she did the right thing. She gave us the final piece. Julian nodded. The safety deposit box? Evidence of the original theft, 30 years old, but still relevant. It establishes a pattern of behavior. The DA will love it. We stood in silence for a moment. Then Julian's phone buzzed. He looked at it and frowned. What is it? Javier, he's asking to meet me. Says it's urgent. Don't go. I have to, Julian said quietly. He's still my brother, and he's falling apart, Camilla. Whatever happens to him legally, he's still family. He stopped being family when he chose ambition over humanity. Maybe. But I need to see him one last time. To look him in the eye and tell him why I chose you. Julian met Javier at a small legal aid office in Brooklyn, neutral territory, safe, with witnesses nearby. He told me about it later, his voice flat and exhausted. Javier had aged a decade and 4 months, unshaven, wearing clothes that didn't fit right, eyes red-rimmed from drinking or crying or both. You have to help me, he'd said immediately. I'm your brother. Julian had stayed standing, maintaining distance. I had a brother once. He died the day he chose ambition over honor. Please. I have nothing. Amanda left, took the baby, and disappeared. I'm living in a motel in Jersey City. I'll apologize to Camilla. I'll do whatever she wants. I'll apologize? Julian's voice had turned cold. You spent 20 years systematically destroying her spirit. You poisoned her father. You tried to steal her company. You humiliated her publicly. And now you want forgiveness? I made mistakes. You made choices, Julian corrected. Every day for 20 years, you chose cruelty. You chose manipulation. You chose greed. You're one to talk. Javier's desperation turned to rage. You took her money too. That law firm, those cases, all funded by Diaz money. You're just as much of a parasite as you think I am. Julian had looked at him then, really looked at him, and felt nothing but pity. Yes, he'd admitted. Camilla funded my work. Money she gave freely to help people you would have crushed without a second thought. That's the difference between her, and you, Javier. She builds. You destroy. I'm your brother. No, Julian said firmly. A brother is someone who stands beside you, someone who lifts you up, someone who tells you the truth even when it hurts. You were never my brother. You were just someone I shared a bloodline with. Javier had lunged then, not violently, just desperately grabbing Julian's arm. Please, I'm begging you, help me. I'll change. I swear I'll change. Julian had carefully removed Javier's hand from his arm. I hope you do change, he'd said quietly. I hope prison gives you time to think about who you've been and who you want to become. I hope you find some kind of redemption. Prison? Julian, you can't let them. I can't stop them. You did this to yourself. Julian had walked to the door, stopped, turned back. For what it's worth, I'm sorry Mother is gone. She loved you, more than you deserved probably, but she loved you. Don't, Javier's voice broke. Don't leave me like this. You left yourself like this. Julian opened the door. Goodbye, Javier. He'd walked out without looking back. The trial lasted 3 weeks. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The camera footage of Javier tampering with medications, the forged will, the embezzlement records, Mary's documents showing the pattern of theft going back 30 years. Javier's defense tried everything. They claimed I'd fabricated evidence. They painted me as a scorned wife seeking revenge. They argued that the medication switching was a misunderstanding. The jury deliberated for 4 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge sentenced him to 12 years in federal prison. I didn't attend the sentencing. Julian did, though. He said Javier showed no emotion when the verdict was read, just stared straight ahead, hollow and broken. He's gone, Julian told me afterward. Whatever he was, good or bad, it's all gone now. He's just empty. Good, I said, but even I wasn't sure I meant it anymore. While Javier's trial proceeded, I turned my attention to the other monster, Victor Santoro. The FBI had arrested him for conspiracy to commit murder, the sabotage of my parents' plane. But his lawyers were good, very good. They argued that Santoro had no direct knowledge of the maintenance contractor's actions, that he was shocked and appalled by what his subordinates had done without authorization. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie. So I hired the best investigative team money could buy, former FBI agents, forensic accountants, corporate espionage specialists. Find everything, I told them. I don't care how long it takes or how much it costs. I want every email, every phone call, every offshore account. I want him buried. It took 18 months, but we found it. Communications between Santoro and the maintenance contractor. Wire transfers to offshore accounts. A paper trail that proved Santoro had personally ordered the sabotage. The evidence went to the FBI. The case went to trial. Santoro was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder, life in prison without parole. The civil suit came next, wrongful death. I sued Santoro Industries for $500 million. We settled for $200 million and a public apology. I didn't keep the money. In my father's library at the Westchester House, I'd found his journals. Years of thoughts, observations, business philosophy. One entry, written shortly after my wedding, struck me. Camila married Javier today. I don't trust him, but I trust her. She's stronger than she knows, stronger than I ever was. When she finally understands her own power, she'll change the world. I just hope I'm alive to see it. He wasn't, but I would honor his faith in me. I established 3 foundations, the Marco and Lucia Diaz Foundation for Corporate Ethics, providing resources for whistleblowers and investigating corporate fraud. The Mary Reeves Center for Stroke Recovery and Elder Care, because even complicated women deserve to be remembered for their final acts of courage. The Second Chances Fund, helping women leave abusive marriages with legal support, financial assistance, and job training. Julian volunteered to serve on the board of all 3. Your mother would be proud, I told him at the first board meeting. So would yours, he replied. Arthur Reeves died in his sleep at 79. I attended the funeral out of respect for Julian. It was small. Arthur had alienated most of his friends over the years with his bitterness and pride. The will reading was a surprise. Arthur's lawyer, a weary-looking man named Davidson, opened the envelope. To my son Javier, currently incarcerated, I leave nothing. He has taken enough from this family already. Davidson paused, clearly uncomfortable. To my son Julian, who became a good man despite my failures as a father, I leave my entire estate. It's not much, approximately $800,000 after debts are settled. Use it to continue your work. You've already done more good in this world than I ever did. He looked at Julian. There's also a letter. Julian opened it with shaking hands, read silently. His eyes filled with tears. When he finished, he handed it to me. Julian, I failed you. I failed both my sons, but in different ways. I spoiled Javier, gave him everything, taught him that the world owed him success. I neglected you, dismissed your idealism, mocked your choice to help the powerless instead of accumulating power. You became a better man than I ever was, not because of me, but in spite of me. I knew what Javier was doing, the medication tampering, the manipulation, all of it. I saw it and did nothing because I was ashamed. Ashamed that I'd raised a monster. Ashamed that I'd failed so completely as a father. By the time I found the courage to do something, Camilla had already handled it. She protected her father, gathered evidence, and brought Javier to justice. She did what I should have done years ago. If you see her, tell her I'm sorry. Sorry I didn't stop the wedding. Sorry I didn't warn Marco. Sorry I was a coward. You chose the right side, son. You chose honor over blood. That takes a kind of strength I never had. I'm proud of you. I should have told you that while I was alive. Father Julian wiped his eyes. He knew. All along he knew. People who love us see more than we think they do, I said softly. What should I do with the money? I didn't hesitate. Split it with the foundations. Your father wanted you to continue your work. That's exactly what this will do. On the 20th anniversary of my wedding day, now my liberation day, I stood in an art studio in Barcelona. I'd sold the Central Park apartment, too many ghosts. Instead, I'd bought a small flat in the Gothic Quarter and spent 6 months learning to breathe again. The studio was sun-filled and messy, clay dust everywhere, shelves lined with pottery in various stages of completion. I was teaching a class, 8 women from the Second Chances shelter. Women who'd left marriages like mine. Women rebuilding their lives one day at a time. The clay doesn't judge you, I told them, my hands covered in red earth. It simply responds to pressure. Too much, it collapses. Too little, it never takes shape. You must find the balance. A young woman named Elena, 26, left her husband after he broke her arm, raised her hand. How do you know when you found it? The balance? I looked at the vase taking shape on my wheel. You don't always know in the moment. Sometimes you only see it later, when the piece is finished and fired, when you can look at it and say, yes, this is what I meant to make. My phone buzzed. A text from Julian. Santoro's final appeal was denied. It's over. Dinner to celebrate? Rosa wants to meet the famous Camila Diaz. I smiled. Julian had gotten married last year to a brilliant immigration lawyer named Rosa Gutierrez. Their wedding had been small and joyful. Everything mine hadn't been. I replied, only if you both come to Barcelona. I'm not leaving the sunshine. Another text came in. Unknown number. My stomach tightened until I read it. Diaz, this is Amanda Miller. I know I'm probably the last person you want to hear from, but I wanted you to know Javier signed away his parental rights. My son will never know him, and I wanted to thank you for exposing who he really was before I wasted my whole life. I hope you're happy now. You deserve it. I read it twice. Then I typed, thank you for telling me. I hope you and your son are safe and well. If you ever need anything, legal help, financial support, contact the Second Chances Fund. No judgment, just help. She responded immediately. Thank you. That means more than you know. I set my phone aside and returned to my class. That evening, I walked to a small gallery in the Gothic Quarter. They were displaying my pottery collection, pieces I'd made over 20 years. Hidden pieces, secret pieces, pieces that chronicled my journey from naive bride to CEO to free woman. The exhibition title, Forged in Fire, 20 Years. And the centerpiece was a large vase, one I'd made in year 5 of my marriage and accidentally dropped. It had shattered into a dozen pieces. I'd repaired it using kintsugi, the Japanese art of mending broken pottery with gold lacquer. The cracks were now veins of gold, beautiful and visible, transforming damage into decoration. A man was standing in front of it when I arrived, tall, silver-haired, elegant in a way that had nothing to do with money. He wore glasses and held a notebook. A professor, I guessed. Remarkable. he said, noticing me. The artist transformed something broken into something more beautiful than it ever was whole. That was the idea, I said. He turned and his eyes widened slightly. You're Camila Diaz, the artist. Guilty. I'm David Castellanos, philosophy professor at University of Barcelona. I've been studying your work for an hour. He gestured to the pieces around the room. Each one tells a story. But this one... He pointed to the kintsugi vase. This one is the thesis, the argument you're making. Which is? That brokenness isn't ending, it's transformation. He looked at me with genuine curiosity. Am I right? I smiled. Close. My argument is that we choose what our brokenness becomes. It can destroy us or it can make us more beautiful. But we have to choose. And you chose beauty. I chose survival first. Beauty came later. He laughed, a warm, genuine sound. Would you like to get coffee? I'd love to hear the stories behind these pieces. I hesitated. 20 years of marriage had taught me caution, but 20 years of freedom had taught me courage. I'd like that, I said. We left the gallery together, two strangers who might become friends, walking through Barcelona's medieval streets as the sun set over the Mediterranean. As we walked, my phone buzzed one final time. Julian. Just booked flights. We'll be there next week. Can't wait to see your new life. Me. Can't wait to show you. I'm happy, Julian. Really, truly happy. Julian. You earned it. Enjoy every second. 6 months later, I stood at the grave of my parents. It was their anniversary, 40 years of marriage. They'd had what I'd always wanted, partnership, respect, love that deepened with time. I did it, Papa, I said quietly, placing fresh flowers on the stone. I took back the company. I built something good. I'm happy. The wind rustled through the trees. In my imagination, I heard his voice. I always knew you would, mija. Julian and Rosa were waiting by the car. We were going to lunch, then to the Second Chances shelter to meet some of the women the foundation had helped. As I walked toward them, my phone rang. A New York number I didn't recognize. Miss Diaz, this is Warden Matthews from FCI Otisville. I'm calling about Javier Reeves. My heart stopped. What about him? He's been participating in our rehabilitation programs. He asked me to contact you. He wants to apologize. In person. I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. Tell Mr. Reeves I appreciate his progress, but I have no interest in seeing him or speaking to him. That chapter of my life is closed. I understand. I'll let him know. Warden, one more thing. Yes? Tell him I forgive him, not because he deserves it, but because I deserve peace. Tell him I hope he finds whatever he's looking for, but tell him to find it without me. I will. Thank you, Ms. Diaz. I hung up and got in the car. Everything okay? Julian asked. Everything, I said, smiling at him and Rosa, is exactly as it should be. 1 year later, David and I had coffee once, then twice, then 3 times a week. We didn't rush. We'd both learned the cost of rushing. But slowly, carefully, something grew between us. Not passion, not yet, but possibility. He never asked about my past. He only cared about my present and future. Will you stay in Barcelona? He asked one evening as we walked along the beach. I don't know, I admitted. The company still needs me, but so does this. I gestured to the sea, the sky, the life I was building. I'm learning to balance both. You're good at balance, he observed. I'm getting better. We walked in comfortable silence. Then he said quietly, If you do go back to New York, I hope you'll visit Barcelona sometimes. I'd miss our conversations. I stopped walking, looked at him. David, I'm not asking for anything, he said quickly. I just wanted you to know. You've become important to me. I took his hand. You've become important to me too. We didn't kiss, not yet, but we stood there, hands clasped, watching the sun set over the Mediterranean, and I thought, this is what beginning again feels like. At 43, I split my time between New York and Barcelona. Diaz Corp flourished under my leadership. We expanded into sustainable luxury goods, became carbon neutral, established fair trade partnerships with artisans around the world. The foundations grew, helped thousands of women, changed laws, saved lives. Julian became one of the country's top human rights lawyers. Rosa became a federal judge. And me? I became the woman my father believed I could be. Strong enough to be kind, ruthless enough to protect what mattered, broken enough to understand other broken people, healed enough to help them mend. On a Tuesday morning in spring, I stood in my office at Diaz Corp looking out at Manhattan. My assistant buzzed. "Miss Diaz, there's someone here to see you. She says it's personal." "Who?" "Amanda Miller, and she has a child with her." My breath caught. "Send her in." Amanda entered, holding the hand of a small boy, maybe 4 years old now. He had her eyes. "I am sorry to come unannounced," she said nervously, "but I wanted you to meet him and to thank you." "Thank me?" "The foundation helped me get my nursing degree. I have a good job now, an apartment, a life." She looked at her son with fierce love. "He'll grow up knowing his mother is strong, because you showed me how to be strong." The little boy looked up at me with curious eyes. "Are you the pottery lady?" I knelt down to his level. "I am. Do you like pottery?" "Mama said you make broken things beautiful." I felt tears prick my eyes. "Your mama is very smart." Amanda's voice was thick with emotion. "I named him Marco. I hope that's okay." I stood, unable to speak for a moment. "It's more than okay," I finally said. "It's perfect." After they left, I sat at my desk, my father's desk, and opened the bottom drawer. Inside was the letter he'd written me. I'd kept it close for 5 years now. I read it again, smiling through tears. Build something better than I ever could. I had. Not just a company, not just foundations, but a life. A real, authentic, hard-won life. I looked at the kintsugi vase on my bookshelf, the broken one made beautiful, and I thought, yes, this is what I meant to make. Thank you so much for staying with me through this entire journey. Camilla's story is one of patience, strength, and the quiet power of women who refuse to be broken, or who, when broken, choose to mend themselves with gold. If this story touched you, if you saw yourself in Camilla's struggle or her triumph, please subscribe to this channel. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Drop a comment about your own journey from darkness to light. And remember, you are not defined by what breaks you. You are defined by how you choose to rebuild. Thank you for listening. Until next time.